This is practice problem number 2 from lesson 3, balanced moves, and unit 4, linear equations and linear systems. And this is a revised version of practice problem number 2. In this problem, you're supposed to match the set of equations. So this is equation 1 going to equation 2. So each set of equations with the move that gets you from this first equation to the second equation. So by move, they mean what operation, either multiplication or addition, and the value that goes with that operation. So negative 1/4, a negative 4, 1/4, a negative 4x, or negative 4. So take these one at a time. For set A, I'm going to change this subtracting 3 to adding a negative 3. And if you look, you have a negative 3 here and a negative 3 here. So those terms are not changing, and you have a positive 9 here and a positive 9 here. So that gives you a hint that this is probably addition, because you're not changing every term. If it were multiplication, every term would change in the same way. So to get rid of this 4x, you're going to add a negative 4x. And over on this side, 6x plus a negative 4x does equal 2x. So adding a negative 4x. And notice these two terms don't change. So once again, if they don't change, then you're not using multiplication. You're using addition. So the answer is 4, adding a negative 4x to both sides. Compare A with E. And notice that in E, every term does change in the same way as you go from the first equation to the second equation. So each term in the second equation is 1/4 of the term in the first equation. So 1/4 of 12 is 3, 1/4 of 4 is 1, 1/4 of 20 is 5, and 1/4 of 24 is 6. So this is a multiplication. Every term is changing in the same way. You might see that you could factor out the 4. So 12 divided by 4 is 3, 4 divided by 4 is 1, 20 divided by 4 is 5, and 24 divided by 4 is 6. So you can factor out that 4 using the distributive property and then multiply each side by 1/4. So 1/4 of 4 is 1. So you're going from 4 groups to 1 group, going from 4 groups to 1 group. You're taking 1/4 of those 4 groups. So this answer is 3. Multiply both sides by 1/4. So now compare A and E to C. And the first thing I'm going to do is change subtracting a positive 10x to adding a negative 10x. And now you can see that two of the terms do not change. This 5x and this 5x, there's no change. And a negative 10x and a negative 10x, there's no change. That tells you that the operation used in C to go from the first equation to the second equation is addition. If it were multiplication, every term would change in the same way. Addition just adds one value to each side, so it only changes one term on each side of the equation. So the 8 is changing to 4, so you're adding negative 4. 8 plus negative 4 is 4, and the 7 changes to 3. So again, you're adding the same thing, a negative 4 to both sides. So 7 plus a negative 4 is 3. So the answer for C is that you're adding a negative 4 to both sides, 5. In B, the change from the first equation to the second equation, I have 4 groups of this 5x minus 7. It's actually the opposite of 4 groups. So it's a negative 4 groups of 5x minus 7, and that's going to go to a single group of 5x minus 7. So this is 1/4 as many groups, and it's the opposite of that. So it's a negative 1/4 of a negative 4. And a negative 1/4 of 18, well, 1/4 of 18 is 4.5. And so a negative 1/4 of a negative 18 is also 4.5. So this is multiplication. You're multiplying by the multiplicative inverse of a negative 4. So the multiplicative inverse of negative 4 is a negative 1/4. So this negative 4 goes away, and you're left with 5x minus 7, and a negative 1/4 times a negative 18 is a positive 18/4. Now you can look at this as 16/4, which is 4, plus 2/4, which is a half. So this answer is 4.5. And so the operation for B is 1. Now notice that it says multiply both sides by -1/4. and I actually multiplied both sides by negative 1/4. So I'm going to talk about this in a moment, but that negative sign for a fraction can go at the numerator, it can go outside the fraction, so it's a negative 1/4, or that negative sign can actually even go with the 4 down here, so it could be 1 over negative 4. And so using the commutative property, you can move that negative sign around, and I'll talk about that in just a moment. And for D, you're getting rid of this 4 here. So this is a negative 1/4. So there's the negative sign there, and there's the 4 there. So it's actually a negative 1/4. The multiplicative inverse of a negative 1/4 is negative 4. So negative 4 times a negative 1/4 is a positive 1, so you're left with 5x. So negative 4 times 4, that's the opposite of 4 times 4. So the opposite of 16 is negative 16. And just a comment about moving this negative sign around. So if I pull this negative sign out and rewrite it as negative 1, you can look at this as a negative 1 times 5x, the total term. Up here it's just a negative 5 times x. This is a negative 1, or the opposite of 5x. They actually are the same thing. It's just writing it in a different way. You can even pull this negative 1 outside of the fraction. So this is using the commutative property. So this is a negative 1 times 1/4 times 5x. So 1/4 times 5x is 5x over 4. So now that negative sign is out here. And you can even pull out the 1/4. So make this a negative 1/4 times 5x. So a negative 1/4 right here. A negative 1 times 1/4 is a negative 1/4 times 5x. So that negative 4 is the multiplicative inverse of a negative 1/4. This becomes 1. You're left with 5x. And you can even move that negative sign using the commutative property down here to a 1 over negative 4. So it's useful to understand when you see a fraction written like this that you can move that negative sign around. It can be in the numerator, it can be in the denominator, or it can be outside the fraction.